Crying Game, Part 2. Having ascertained that the commission of tears, arising from physical and or emotional hurt, resulted in a sympathetic reaction from certain people, I committed this to memory. I have rarely encountered much serious physical pain as an adult, enjoying excellent health, and ensuring that I always get my retaliation in first, so that my enemies are the one who experience physical pain rather than me. The early conditioning that I have been subjected to, as I now understand, appears to have resulted in me being impervious to many emotional injuries that others suffer from. Even the horrendous sensations which arise from me being wounded as a consequence of certain behaviours of others does not cause any tears to fall. Instead, I must focus on repairing the wound through retreat or the instigation of fury in order to gather fuel. The attention this requires means that I don't suffer any immediate reaction of being upset. If I were ever to do so, I must feign upset, not that I choose that, it is beneath me, in order to attract the required sympathy, and in doing so, one would use that issued sympathy in order to bring about the control required over the relevant subject. My tuition in the art and use of crying later embraced a different catalyst, and one which has served to drive me ever onwards and upwards. I have many talents, and of those the one that was cherished the most by my father was my academic ability. As I have mentioned before, he was a very intelligent man, well-read, and with an interest in the world at large, something which he bestowed on all of his offspring. This served him well in both his careers of commerce and then academia. His was the steady hand at the tiller of our academic progress, and he sought to steer a path through the choppy waters of my mother's ambitions for us, our own desires, and what he felt would serve us best. The three, as might you expect, were not always compatible. I excelled at school, which naturally resulted in my progression to sixth form college, and I was always destined for university. Naturally, it was to the most prestigious that I was directed, and I achieved admission, whereupon in such a fertile environment, I began to flex my tendrils as I embraced my dark art. But that is a tale for another time. Alongside this, I flourished at my chosen discipline, and eventually I graduated with an excellent result. It was this achievement which Dr. E honed in on one of our discussions. "So, double first, quite the achievement," he remarked. I nodded. He was not wrong. "What did your parents think about it?" he asked. My friends, once they had their results, went racing away to telephone their parents to let them know the outcome. I didn't. Why? It had already been arranged that I was meeting my parents for dinner that evening, and that was when it was stipulated that I would tell them my degree result once we had ordered food. What did you think of that arrangement? Weren't you keen to tell your parents sooner of your success? I suppose so, I answered, but I knew that there was little point. Even if I had tried to telephone them, nobody would have answered. My mother would have deliberately absented the house so that I couldn't reach them, so as to avoid spoiling the anticipation at dinner. "So this arrangement was at your mother's behest?" asked Dr. E. "Of course. Who else would it be? If I achieved the expected outcome, the evening would pass pleasantly. If I did not, I would be subjected to a lengthy cross-examination, unable to avoid it by putting the telephone down." "I see. It was fortuitous, then, that you achieved such an excellent result," he observed. "Fortune had nothing to do with it," I responded. "The dinner was placed in the diary as soon as my mother knew when the examination results would be posted. It was a further incentive for me to achieve what was only ever expected of me." Dr. E nodded and made a note. "How did the meal progress then?" he asked. "How did they react to news of your achievement?" "Once our orders had been placed and the waiter walked away, my mother turned to me," I explained, "and she asked, 'Well?' I responded with, 'I obtained a double first,' and she answered by saying, 'As expected, I'll make the call.' And she left the table to telephone the other family members to let them know. Probably her brother first of all, out of all of them. No mention of well done or congratulations, asked Dr. E. I shook my head. And your father? He asked. My father waited until my mother was out of earshot, and he reached across and placed his hand upon my arm, and said, Well done, HG. Very well done. That's a fantastic outcome. I know just how hard you have had to work for that result. It is a magnificent result, truly outstanding. I'm so very proud of you, son. Very proud indeed. And then I noticed that as he said the word proud, his voice cracked, and I looked up into his eyes, and I could see that he was crying. I had never seen my father cry before. Ever. I had seen him concerned, downcast, worried, and so much more, but never the tears. His face was fixed with a huge smile, and he tried to speak again, but he was overcome with pride. Pride for me. Just me. I had not seen anything like it. How did you feel about him showing such pride for you? I was taken aback, but then I felt this surge through me, and it felt amazing. It was visceral, and ever so powerful as I continued to look at him, the tears filling his eyes, and he kept nodding. His hand patted my arm. I can still see it now. He wasn't able to speak, but the look on his face and that nodding told me that somehow he felt that the job was done, that the mission had been accomplished, and that he was proud of me for doing so. I have not forgotten that moment. Why is that? Asked Dr. E. Because the way I felt when I saw my father cry those tears of pride at my achievement made me want to see that again. The sense of power that he imbued in me, his praise, his pride, his adoration of my achievement, was so edifying that it made me strive even harder. Oh, my mother thinks that she's the driving force behind my success, and it would be wrong to say she's not been. She has been a huge influence in her way, but from that point onwards, my postgraduate achievement, my securing employment and advancing through the hierarchy to where I am now, and also in terms of my other interests and what the future may bring, was driven by my father. I wanted to feel that power again, and for that to happen, I wanted to see those tears of pride again. Accordingly, I worked damn hard. I never knew that pride could make somebody cry, and I never knew until then that somebody's proud tears would make me feel so powerful. I see, noted Dr. E. And did you see those tears of pride again from your father? I felt the first flicker of the ignition of my fury at this question. No, I responded. Once again, something special to me was taken from me.